CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to The World Today, live from CGTN in London. I'm Stephen Cole. Our top stories. China's Foreign Minister calls for dialogue and cooperation in his annual two-sessions press conference. The check's almost in the post. President Biden hopes Americans will receive COVID relief payments this month as the Senate passes a massive stimulus package. British-Iranian woman Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe faces a new court date, despite being freed after a 5-year sentence. And Switzerland votes on whether or not to ban full face coverings in a row over religious clothing. But first, China's foreign minister says Beijing is ready to work with the United States to improve relations. Wang Yi stressed the importance of cooperation and multilateralism in his annual press conference during China's two sessions. He also addressed accusations over alleged human rights abuses in Xinjiang. Zhong Yibing reports.
Wang Yi began by the commitment to the global fight against COVID-19.
China will continue to cooperate with other countries in solidarity and work tirelessly towards humanity's final victory against this pandemic.
This year marks the 20th anniversary of China's accession to the World Trade Organization. The Chinese foreign minister said all countries and regions should stay committed to the principle of win-win cooperation and find solutions together.
The answer is not to retreat into protectionism, isolation, or decoupling, but to work together to make globalization more open, inclusive, balanced, and beneficial for all.
He praised ties with Russia, saying they were standing together to maintain world peace and stability. And on the United States, Wang stressed the importance of dialogue.
What matters most is to manage the differences and disagreements effectively through candid communication to prevent strategic miscalculation and avoid conflict and confrontation.
When asked about the current situation in Hong Kong, Wang said improving the region's electoral system was a domestic affair. It was to ensure patriots were administering Hong Kong, and he called for truthful and objective views on issues related to the autonomous regions of Xinjiang and Tibet.
I hope that when reporting on China, foreign journalists will not apply any filter to their camera. Truthful, objective, and fair stories will always appeal to people.
China says it will join hands with other countries to address global challenges like global economic recovery, infectious diseases, and climate change. China also says it will continue to pursue the policy of opening up and cooperation and promote the building of the new type of international relations with a shared future for mankind. Zheng Yibing, CGTN, Beijing.
Wang also discussed relations with Europe. CGTN's Andrew Wilson joins me now from Oxford. Andrew, what did Wang Yi have to say?
Well, Stephen, it's the centrepiece of his address, really, this deal with the European Union between Beijing and Brussels, comprehensive agreement on investment. It hasn't been signed yet, but it's been agreed in principle, and that opens the door more to formalising trade relations between the European Union and China. They already enjoy fairly fulsome trade relations. I think cumulative China's investment in the EU has come to something like $120 billion, and it has bilateral agreements with all the European countries. But now it has a trade agreement being built between the European Union itself, the largest trading bloc in the world, and it gave the foreign minister a chance to explain and elaborate on China's sense of positivity about having a new partner in the world, of two sophisticated and ancient civilizations coming together to create a peaceful community without suspicion, with open dialogue and so on. And all this has been, it seems, rushed at the last minute. I mean, there's been 35 rounds of negotiations for this deal since 2013. 2013, but all of a sudden, after 3 video conferences, including President Xi Jinping himself on these video conferences with the European leaders, they've managed to get this thing agreed before the 2 sessions this week. So that is the centerpiece, if you like, of China's ability to say it's opening up even further into the global economy. This is a sample of what Wang Yi had to say today.
In the face of crises and challenges, relations between China and Europe have demonstrated resilience and vitality, sending out a positive message to the world. Past experiences prove that both share extensive common interests, and win-win cooperation is the main thrust of the relationship. China and Europe are 2 great civilizations capable of dialogue and exchanges. They are not systemic rivals.
Now, there'll be plenty in Europe who agree with exactly with what the foreign minister has to say, but there will be some who have their reservations as well. A lot of the energy behind this deal will have been Angela Merkel, who herself brought up during the Cold War in East Germany, has some experience in her own life of bringing rivaling sides together in agreement and moving forwards with a unification process. She's been pushing this quite hard. This really benefits particularly the German automotive industry, but she's gone in September. She's finally stepping down, and there'll be a new leader in place in the Chancellery in Berlin, and that may change things. The other slight problem with this is that the Americans have yet to comment, but there will be those that see this as driving something of an early wedge between Brussels and Washington. Now, Wang Yi himself was at pains to explain today that this is not intended to be something that gets between the relationship between the European Union and the Americans, but nonetheless it may be seen that way, and it may be that while Joe Biden is getting ready to start calling for stronger transatlantic alliances in America's hunt to restabilize after the Trump administration's 4 years, that might be seen as problematic for those that have signed up for the Chinese deal. So there may be quite a bit of argument going on in the European Union corridors over the next 12 months before this thing is signed and ratified.
Interesting. All right, Andrew, thanks very much for joining us. Let's get more on this now from the author and broadcaster Martin Jakes. Martin is with us live from London. First of all, Martin, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi criticised the United States for meddling in the country's internal affairs. Antony Blinken, President Biden's Secretary of State, believes diplomacy must be supplemented by deterrence. Would you say that means relations between Beijing and Washington are strained at the moment, or the possibility of strain there? And if so, is there a way forward?
Well, I think that in one sense, Biden has continued with the relationship with China along the lines of Trump. But in another sense, the whole thing is toned down. Blinken's statement actually was a relatively what should we say, restrained expression of the view on China. So there's definitely...
Well, it was diplomatic, certainly, but he does seem to be taking a tougher line to his predecessor.
You don't mean... What do you mean by predecessor?
I mean President Trump.
Oh, I think that by and large the position is less aggressive than was the case with the Trump presidency, and I think that is the general tenor, actually. Now, having said that, there's no sign of yet that, for example, as Wang Yi said today and previously, of lifting any of the restrictions on China with regard to trade, with regard to cultural connections, and so on. So at the moment, we're in a position where we're still, I think, waiting to hear more from the Biden administration. But I think that if you compare the situation now with prior, for the Obama period, then no question there's continuity in an aggressive attitude towards China.
What about the relationship between China and Europe? How do you see that relationship panning out? Or is the real relationship between Germany and China?
Well, I think the investment treaty between China and the European Union is extremely important. And I think that it reflects a desire on the part of the Europeans to have a good and closer relationship with China. I think that the eastward glance, if you like, of Europe towards China, Belt and Road and so on, that is growing. And the fact that this treaty has come, at the end of the Trump period and just as Biden begins, is extremely important. Because all the talk was, well, Biden's going to rebuild the alliances and all that kind of thing, especially vis-a-vis China. Well, it doesn't look so promising from the American point of view, given given this treaty. And I think the treaty is very important. I think it looks like a new strategic approach, and I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't gain momentum. And you're right to say that Germany is crucial here. Well, Merkel has been crucial because this is not a new phenomenon. Germany has had a geo-economic approach to the rising countries like China, and therefore, for a long time, it's had close economic relationship with China.
Okay, Martin, just very briefly, how important to China is how it's regarded around the world?
I think it's extremely important because if you're a country that is a huge trading entity and investment entity, then your relations with your well-being, your prosperity, and so on depends greatly on your relationship with countries around the world. I think there's no question about that. But let's define the world a bit differently from how it's normally defined from where we are in Britain now and the West. The world is the world. 85% of the world live in the developing countries.
Martin Jakes, many thanks to you for joining us.
Thank you.
Our Two Sessions coverage continues on Monday. We'll be bringing you a special report on the relationship between European car makers and China and the race to go electric. In the US, a major spending package aimed at helping the Americans struggling from the impact of the coronavirus pandemic could become law within days. The $1.9 trillion plan was approved by the Senate on Saturday after a marathon 27-hour session. The bill will now go on to the House of Representatives. Let's go to Giles Gibson from DC. Giles, what exactly is in this $1.9 trillion spending plan, and what were the sticking points in getting it through?
Well, Stephen, 1.9 trillion, of course, is a very large number, so there is a very long list of things in this piece of legislation that's now been passed by the US Senate. But I'll just give you some of the real key points from it. There are these $1,400 stimulus checks, which could start going out to Americans within the next couple of weeks. There's also the $300 weekly unemployment benefit. That's been extended until early September. There's also tens of billions of dollars in this bill to fight the coronavirus, to fight COVID-19. Lots of money for more testing, as well as to boost vaccine distribution all over the United States. And after this vote in the Senate, US President Joe Biden said that he is delivering on campaign promises. Take a listen.
When we took office 45 days ago, I promised the American people that help was on the way. Today, I can say we've taken one more giant step forward in delivering on that promise, that help is on the way. This nation has suffered too much for much too long. And everything in this package is designed to relieve the suffering and to meet the most urgent needs of the nation and put us in a better position to prevail.
Now, of course, one thing that is not in this legislation that was passed by the Senate is raising the federal minimum wage to $15 per hour. And, Stephen, that could be a real problem when this legislation goes down to the House of Representatives for a vote that we're expecting on Tuesday. And that's because there's just a lot of people on the sort of left wing of the Democratic Party. I'm thinking people like Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, known as AOC here in the United States, who are absolutely furious that that raise to the federal minimum wage was dropped due to various Senate legislation rules. And so with the Democrats having such a small majority in the House of Representatives, really every single vote is going to count if they're going to get this through Congress and get it to Joe Biden's desk at the White House. And
we'll be watching that closely. Giles Gibson in D.C. Many thanks, Giles. Let's take a brief look now at some other news from around the world. Tens of thousands of protesters took the streets of Myanmar again on Sunday despite overnight raids and arrests by security forces. These are the pictures from the second city of Mandalay. Meanwhile, security forces fired rubber bullets to disperse crowds near the ancient city of Bagan. The protest began when the army seized power from the elected government of Aung San Suu Kyi a month ago. Since then, the UN says almost 50 people have been killed. The British-Iranian woman Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe, who today completed a 5-year jail term in Tehran on spying charges, is now facing a new court date. The aid worker, who spent the last 12 months under house arrest, was convicted of plotting to overthrow the government. Her ankle tag has been removed, but she's been summoned to reappear in court next Sunday for what her supporters fear could be a second set of charges. The Iranian President Hassan Rouhani says his country is ready to take steps to meet its commitments in the 2015 nuclear deal as soon as the US lifts economic sanctions. He's been holding talks with Ireland's Foreign Minister Simon Coveney, who travelled to Tehran in his capacity as a UN Security Council facilitator. Rouhani criticised the European signatories of the agreement for not acting on their commitments, saying Iran is the only country that's kept its side of the bargain. Pope Francis has said prayers among church ruins in Mosul, northern Iraq, in territory formerly held by the Islamic State group. On the third day of his historic visit to the country, the pontiff also met Christians after expressing concern for their safety in the country. The Pope also celebrated Mass at a stadium in Erbil, which was attended by thousands of worshippers. Still to come here on The World Today. Germany gets ready to lift lockdown restrictions with the opening of some non-essential shops on Monday. While after months of home learning, it's back to school on Monday for English students.
Patient after patient after patient. They take a long time to get better. They're the sickest patients we've ever seen.
It's a race against time, because we can all see the threat that our NHS faces, the pressure it's under.
We're dealing with something we knew very little about.
Europe's first 2 epicentres in February have received their first dose of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine.
Another day, another grim milestone for the UK in its fight against COVID-19. 100,000 people have now lost their lives after contracting the virus.
NPC and CPPCC, China's biggest annual political gathering of lawmakers and political advisors. As the world's second largest economy recovers from the pandemic, it chalks out plans for the coming year and beyond. With new proposals, laws, and targets, CGTN brings you unmatched coverage of the meetings that matter. Exclusive interviews, people's voices, in-depth analysis, and the impact on the rest of the world. China's 2 sessions begins March 4th. Live and exclusive on CGTN.
Welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. China's foreign minister is calling for dialogue and cooperation in his annual press conference. The check has almost been paid. President Biden hopes Americans will receive COVID relief payments this month as the Senate passes a massive stimulus package. Switzerland is on course to ban face coverings in public places. Counting is still underway, but results from 22 of the country's 29 cantons show 54% of voters are in favour of outlawing the burqa and the niqab. Our correspondent Julia Lyobova reports from Geneva.
The vote on the burqa ban comes after years of a debate in Switzerland after similar bans were made in other European countries. However, it's thought to only apply to a handful of residents. Women in Islamic full-face veil is an exceptionally rare sight in Switzerland. With the right-wing People's Party backed the ban. But amid concern about discrimination towards Muslims, the government and parliament opposed it and even had a counter-proposal that would require people to show their faces for identification to the authorities. Opponents of the ban said it was absurd, both because of the low number of niqab wearers in the country and because Switzerland's regions can legislate on such issues themselves. Julia Lubova, CGTN, Geneva.
Germany is set to start easing some of its restrictive lockdown measures on Monday. The five-step process will see some non-essential businesses reopen. However, as Natalie Carney reports from Munich, this comes as the country battles a surge in COVID-19 variants.
Bookstore owner Ruth Karenka is excitingly preparing her shop for the big reopening on Monday.
I've missed the normality of things. I was in the shop, of course, and I sold online. But then the customers came knocking on the windows and I couldn't go to them. We weren't allowed to talk and that was stressful.
Customers have been allowed to collect online orders but have not been allowed inside shops since mid-December. And despite there being an uptick in reading due to lockdown, Ruth says her sales are down around 50% for the year already. Lockdown measures were set to end completely on Monday, but due to the increase in more contagious coronavirus variants, authorities have agreed to a five-step gradual reopening of some non-essential shops such as bookstores and garden centers, while others will be allowed to reopen where virus case rates stay low.
Also decided every citizen will be entitled to one free corona rapid test per week. These tests will be done at different centers and paid for by the government. As well, you can also do it yourself at home. Corona rapid tests are also now purchasable at many grocery stores and pharmacies across the country for €5.
On Saturday, German discount grocery store Aldi reported that stock sold out within hours, leaving some customers disappointed.
I arrived here 10 minutes ago. I thought there would be no more tests because of the high demand. It was predictable. But I would have been happy if I could have bought one.
Yet as COVID variants increase, Germany's health minister has emphasized reopening will be a careful balancing act. Chancellor Angela Merkel has stressed that an emergency brake will allow authorities to reimpose curbs if case numbers go above 100 per 100,000 people for 3 consecutive days. For Ruth, all this has influenced what books she stocks.
I am now prepared for more customers to come, and it's also very important to consider which topics people are interested in, because now times have changed. The people are much more political.
Whatever they are reading, Ruth will be happy to see customers return to her store again, in person. Natalie Carney for CGTN in Munich, Germany.
The British government is considering longer school days and shorter holidays to try and help students in England catch up on lessons lost as a result of the lockdown. A 5-year term is also among the measures being discussed. Schools across the country are reopening on Monday, and as John Bevier reports, after a year of disruption, teachers now face the difficult task of getting education back on track.
For weeks now, playgrounds have been quiet and classrooms empty. Only a limited number of pupils have been in school in England, such as the children of key workers. But on Monday, all that changes when schools reopen. John Moss is a head teacher and works for the Gloucestershire Learning Alliance, which runs 7 schools. There's a huge disparity in what impact lockdown has had on their 2,000 pupils.
We've set a questionnaire to every single child across the trust to understand their perception of lockdown. How much help were they getting at home? How did they feel about their learning? What are they most looking forward to about getting back to school? Once we get them back, there's actually only 18 school days before we break up for Easter. So how do you maximise those 18 school days?
Like schools across the country, staff here have been teaching online, but all say that nothing beats face-to-face learning. Although schools reopening does mark the return of some sort of normality, things will still be very different when pupils come through the gates on Monday. For secondary schools, there'll be mass coronavirus testing and staff wearing masks. Those rules don't apply to primary schools like this, but for all pupils, there'll be no exams this year, replaced instead by teacher assessments. Unions have voiced concern about the added stress that will put on teachers and pupils, but the government insists it's the fairest option and has also pledged extra support to help children returning to school.
I'm very hopeful that it will work, it will all go according to plan, and that all kids, all pupils will be back in school tomorrow. I'm massively grateful to parents who've put up with so much throughout the pandemic, teachers who've done an amazing job of keeping going. But I do think that we're ready. I think people want to go back. I think they feel it, they feel the need for it. And you ask about the risk. I think the risk is actually in not going back.
After a year unlike any other, nobody on the front line of teaching is under any illusion about the scale of the challenge they now face.
We have to take time over months, maybe a couple of academic years for some pupils to really help them build the knowledge they need to have fully recovered.
Final preparations are now underway to make schools as safe as they can be ahead of reopening. And all are now hoping that there won't be any further closures. John Beaver, CGTN, Worcestershire.
The UK's former Brexit negotiator says the EU should shake off any remaining ill will over the nation's decision to leave. Writing in the Sunday Telegraph newspaper, David Frost criticised the EU for threatening to override the Brexit deal by restricting exports of COVID-19 vaccines. Mr. Frost defended the UK's unilateral move to extend the grace period of checks on the movement of goods between Britain and Northern Ireland, over which the EU says it'll launch legal action. A highly anticipated interview with Britain's Duke and Duchess of Sussex, better known as Prince Harry and Meghan, is airing in the United States on Sunday night. The 90-minute chat with the talk show host Oprah Winfrey comes amid reportedly strained relations between the couple and Buckingham Palace. Meghan is due to talk about the couple's departure from British royal life, while Prince Harry will discuss their new life and future plans. And finally, some welcome relief for music lovers. Dutch dance fans were allowed to let their hair down for the first live show in over a year, despite COVID-19 restrictions. 1,300 people served as guinea pigs for a research project. Wearing electronic tags, groups were given different freedoms to see what would work best when venues returned to normal business. Attendees had to have a negative test, and with the site nowhere near capacity, there was plenty of room to dance off the lockdown blues. And our top story again. China's foreign minister says Beijing is ready to work with the United States to improve relations. Wang Yi stressed the importance of cooperation and multilateralism in his annual press conference during China's 2 sessions. Coming up next is Razor, CGTN Europe's flagship science and technology show. This week, when you set out to save an iconic species, you can also help save a whole ecosystem. The battle to save Australia's little blue penguins with the help of some unexpected allies. And that's Razor right after the World Today at 16:30 GMT here on CGTN. And that's it from the World Today. Thanks for watching. We're available on smart TV apps such as Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV. You can also find us on YouTube and Dailymotion, as well, of course, at cgtn.com and on the CGTN app. From all the team here in London, it's goodbye.